Hi, this is Steve with Thresher Media Group. Welcome to When You're Ready to Listen. This podcast is dedicated to exploring the truth about God, things you may not have understood, may not have been taught, or quite frankly, had a very hard time believing. And since our entire relationship with God rests on believing, it is important we learn how to separate the truth from the many lies and fictions that abound within the religion of Christianity. So when you're ready to listen, tune in and discover a pathway to freedom, encouragement, life, and hope. Episode 55, Revelation 6, verses 1 through 2. Overview: opening the first 6 seals on the scroll. Following this glorious scene of spontaneous worship, we come to a huge transition as the Lamb, who is worthy, begins to break open the seals on the scroll. Fiction alert, fiction alert. It's often presumed that with the opening of the scrolls, the end times or the 7-year tribulation begins. And with this presumption, many parts of the text are forced into a box that the Spirit did not create. This has led to a lot of fictions and a lot of misunderstanding about the end times. Even the ominous phrase, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, leads to a mischaracterization of the events unleashed by the opening of the seals, for that framed nomenclature ties the release of these 4 horses to the time of the 7-year tribulation. But everything is not as we have been told. When we choose to stick to the code, we find that some of the events that are unleashed by the opening of the seals are even now occurring, and have been occurring every moment of our now since the time of the unveiling. Thus, we must let the text speak for itself and not presuppose any outcome on the text which derives from our own creation or our own paradigm of end times events. And let's always remember, the Spirit is exacting and precise in his choice of language and the use of the code. The code is the cipher for interpreting the codex. Those who do not use this cipher will come to all sorts of erroneous conclusions which derive from their instinctual religious wisdom. And no matter how many people, teachers, experts, or scholars subscribe to these fictions, and no matter how loud and often these fictions are publicized, they fall short and require significant compromise of the text across the codex, and even a compromise of well-accepted textual principles like expositional constancy. Let us be those who are now having ears to hear what the Spirit is saying to the churches. Seal 1 is opened. Revelation 6, 1 through 2. Then I saw when the Lamb broke one of the 7 seals, and I heard one of the 4 living creatures now saying, as with a voice of thunder, "You are commanded to choose to now come." I looked, and behold, a white horse, and he who chooses to now be sitting on it is now having a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he had went out now conquering and to conquer. The Spirit had John utilize the generic past tense, the aorist active indicative, for what he saw, heard, and for the seal that was opened. So you would naturally think that he would have rendered what one of the 4 said similarly in the past tense as said. He saw, he heard, and this was said. However, he utilizes the present active participle. Hence, one of the 4 is even now saying to this writer, "You are commanded to choose to now come." This is important, as this is foreshadowing for us that the events of this seal are something that we are not waiting for, but has been happening every moment of our now. Moreover, one of the 4 speaks this command with a voice like thunder, loud and booming. Of the 4 horsemen that are called out, this is the only one that is commanded to choose to now come with a voice like thunder. The others are just commanded to choose to now come, and no comment is made about the quality or the character of the sound. Perhaps the meaning of this first horse is so important that it deserves to be announced with loud thundering. The number 1. It is important for us to understand the specific numerology associated with each seal and the events that are unleashed by the opening of the seal. Given that according to the code, the number 1 is associated with unity, we should find that the events of this horse and rider, in one way, shape, or form, bring about unity. Horses. Let us start with the horse. It's not uncommon in the realm of the unseen to have angelic type creatures travel via spiritual horses. This speaks not just about a mode of transportation, but in John's day and age, it was a picture of speed and strength and the providential movements of God as he shapes the nations. Historically, art has always depicted angels with wings of their own and the ability to fly, not needing horses for transportation. But the image of riders on horses is very emissary-like, as God sends his angels, his agents, his ambassadors to the nations to implement or effect his purpose amongst the realm of man. The white horse. I looked, and behold, a white horse. According to the code, white speaks of purity and righteousness. There is never, ever, ever a time where white speaks of deception, fraud, or duplicity. White is always a symbol representing purity and righteousness, not just throughout the book of Revelation, but throughout the Codex. Therefore, according to the practice of expositional constancy, we must apply the code correctly and must not change our understanding of this color to fit our positional purposes. Fiction alert. Fiction alert. In that vein, one of the biggest fictions that has arisen within the religion of Christianity is the identity of this horse and rider. To force fit a pre-tribulation rapture view, many teachers have decided that white means something more akin to gray, off-white, something dark, sinister, deceptive, and evil. They predominantly say this horse reveals the coming of the Antichrist, a false white who is sent to conquer and deceive the nations. Not only is this understanding a blatant violation of expositional constancy and the code, if this were pointing forward to the coming of the Antichrist, it would not be presented to us in the present tense, something happening now. Yet the conquering deeds of the rider of the horse are even now happening. Simply said, there is nothing in this image that would even hint at the fact that white is not white, but instead a veiled darkness. One must blatantly make things up and insert them into the text to come up with this conclusion. Sadly, we find that within the religion of Christianity, that if important teachers speak with authority, people swallow their lies. And that is what this is, a big fat lie that cannot be supported by the text or any other part of the scriptures. It is nothing more than a gross and flagrant exhibition of sensuality, i.e. instinctual religious wisdom, the kind of which Jude warns us about. This is just another example of people trying to run with an agenda that cannot be supported by the details of the passage. Rather, this conclusion is dependent upon reading into the passage some agenda-based presupposition that is simply not there. In addition, this errant understanding focuses our attention on who the writer is and not his purpose. Yet, except for the fourth horse, the who is never at issue, just the what. The emphasis is on their purpose. And the purpose of this writer is to now be conquering with all purity and righteousness. The writer. And he who chooses to now be sitting on it, now having a bow and a crown was given to him, and he had went out, now conquering and to conquer. The code here is critical to properly understanding this image. First, this writer is making the choice to be sitting on this horse. Second, the writer is now having on him a bow. Third, the writer had already been given a crown of victory, a Stephanos. Fourth, he has already gone forth. We are not waiting for this to happen. Fifth, he is now conquering. It is what he does. Sixth, he is purposed, but not always guaranteed, to conquer. These 6 attributes make it clear that this writer is assigned to work amongst humanity, as according to the code, 6 is the number of man. Fiction alert, fiction alert. This is not the beginning of the tribulation. The modern fiction states that the 7-year tribulation begins with the ride of this white horse. However, let us start with the obvious. Because this writer has already gone forth and is even now conquering, we cannot in any way tie the opening of this first seal to the beginning of the tribulation period. For those who purport this fiction, they simply do not believe the Holy Spirit was exacting and precise in his choice of language, and that he decided to leave it up to others to argue about and figure out based on their own understanding. To me, that is just sheer hubris. By the way, we will find out in the book of Revelation that there is no clear-cut starting point to the first 3.5-year period of the tribulation. We must look to the book of Daniel to get an idea of the starting point. The famed peace treaty. In Daniel, we discover a newsworthy event where this mysterious one referred to as he will make a firm or strong treaty or covenant with the many for a period of 7 years. But halfway through this period, he will put a stop to any religious activity, sacrifice and offerings, and on the wing of abomination, or right before the abomination of desolation, will come one who makes desolate, this is talking about the destroyer, even until a complete destruction, one that is decreed. Now, this passage in Daniel is a bit cryptic and hard to decipher without the codex. What this image communicates is that early on in his career, and before he is possessed by the demon whose name is the destroyer or destruction, also known as the beast, imaged in Job as the eagle, the man we call the Antichrist, who at that time is possessed by lesser demons, imaged in Job as the hawk, he negotiates some sort of treaty with the many. Now, we don't know what this treaty is or to who the many specifically refers, even though most everyone seems to think it's a reference to a peace treaty with Israel. And it may be, at least in part. But following the codex, we might just unpack an even deeper and more profound understanding of this treaty with the many. This man, a ruler, negotiates a treaty with the many for 7 years. And this is the definitive indication or sign that the first 3.5 years of the tribulation has begun. But we must ask, why does there need to be a treaty in the first place? Given the fact that at the halfway mark, the end of the first 3.5 years, this ruler seeks to destroy religion, pictured by putting an end to the sacrifice and offerings, and this occurs on the wing of abomination, right before the abomination of desolation, where he declares himself to be God. By implication, we can deduce that this treaty will somehow be connected to the massive tribulation that Jesus said would come against his people. A tribulation that would inspire the great apostasy. Jesus describes this time as follows in Matthew 24, 9 through 13. Then they will deliver you to tribulation and will kill you, and you will be hated by all nations because of my name. At that time, many will fall away and will betray one another and hate one another. Many false prophets will arise and will mislead many. Because lawlessness is increased, most people's agape love will grow cold. But the one who endures to the end, he will be saved. Clearly, a time like this has yet to occur on the earth. But Jesus predicted that his faithful will be hated by all nations. We get a picture of this with the opening of the third seal and the ride of the black horse. Again, this hatred, along with its associated persecution, will be so intense that many will apostatize. They will literally fall away from their faith. This is referred to as the great apostasy. Now, this is just a guess, but perhaps this treaty, mentioned in Daniel 9:27, relaxes the persecution against true believers and against the Jews, or those in religion at large, the many, for just a brief moment in time, as this man prepares for his great war of destruction against the people of God. He lulls them into his graces with a deceptive gesture, but before long, he turns against them in wrath with a declaration, "Worship me as God or die." From the Codex, we know that when this man, the Antichrist, is possessed by the destroyer, the beast, an idol of his likeness will be set up, and all will be demanded to worship it or else be killed. This is the famed abomination of desolation, which Jesus spoke about. This possessed man then starts a systematic, aggressive, and very quick extermination of all those who call on Yahweh as their God. It was given him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. Daniel refers to it as the shattering of the hand or power of the holy people. Hence Daniel's statement that the end will come with a flood and war. These events might be what we see pictured later in the destruction of the famed woman who rides the beast, which we'll discover is a picture of the spirit behind the world religions, including the religion of Christianity and modern Judaism. In Revelation 17, the Spirit is declaring that there will be a universal judgment on the religions of this world, which have prostituted themselves with idolatry and the worship of demons. They will be exposed for their lies and be violently ended. This will obviously be Yahweh's plan, but carried out through the agency of the demonic. For God has put it in their hearts to execute his purposes by having a common purpose and by giving their kingdoms to the beast until the words of God be fulfilled. With that said, the text is painstakingly detailed, identifying that this war against religion will start with the beast's consortium of rulers, who are imaged as 10 horns, or 10 rulers, and then by the beast himself. This order is significant since the aggression against those in religion will begin well before the beast is released from the abyss, which occurs at the sounding of the 5th trumpet. In Daniel, we are told that a ruler will arise whose armies will destroy the city and the holy place, not the temple at large, but specifically the sanctuary within the temple. The end will come with a flood and war, and its miseries are decreed from that time to the very end. So perhaps it is during this war against religion, initiated by the 10 horns, imaged as a flood, given its fast and universal judgment, that this treaty with the many is made, calling for a temporary 7-year cessation of violence and destruction. Clearly, with this treaty in place, the 2 witnesses of Revelation 11 will have time and space to preach during the first 3.5 years of the tribulation. By the way, the imagery is consistent in its use of these apocalyptic images in the Old Testament and the New Testament in that they do not refer to the temple at large, but always, quite specifically, to the holy place or the sanctuary of God, the place in which only the priests of God may enter. The Holy Spirit in the New Testament forces our understanding of this phrase and ties this to the bondservants of Jesus Christ, his priests, who are in Hebrew, the naos, or the holy place, the sanctuary of God. The Codex is also clear that there is a separation between the making of the treaty and the coming of the one who makes desolate, the destroyer. That is consistent with the notion that the war is initiated by the 10 horns and is later picked up by the beast after his release from the abyss. In other words, the destroyer comes immediately before the abomination of desolation, or as Daniel says, on the wing of desolation, with the blowing of the 5th trumpet. He is the one who makes desolate. Accordingly, we can conclude that the Antichrist does not come into ultimate global power at the beginning of the tribulation. For at that time he is not yet possessed by the beast, whose name is destroyer or destruction. Rather, he is possessed by lesser demons. According to Job and Daniel, we are given the indication that he is first possessed by terrible but less powerful demons, imaged in Job as a hawk, and referred to as the invading prince of the north in Daniel. Thus, some of his initial dealings, including the making of this treaty with the many, will be prior to the time the beast is released from the abyss, which occurs close to the end of the first 3.5-year period. However, once the beast is released and possesses this man, he embodies all that we have come to know about this man we call the Antichrist. He becomes not just a global dictator, but takes on the mantle of God, demanding all to worship him, which is why he eventually breaks the treaty with the many after the first 3.5 years. Still, according to the Codex, he is only given authority to act in this way and to speak arrogant words and blasphemies for 3.5 years, literally 42 months, the second 3.5 years of the tribulation. Note on the treaty, Daniel 9:27, the one exception. Let's consider this treaty with the many in connection with the nation of Israel, even though it will largely encompass a bigger picture than just the nation of Israel and be a war against religion at large. With that said, Looking into the Codex, we come across a passage that fits the overall narrative when it comes to the Antichrist's abject hostility towards those who love their religion and worship anyone other than the beast. And once again, it points us to the majesty and absolute sovereignty of Yahweh. In Isaiah 28, verse 14 through 19, which is a layered text, but most definitely deals with the end times, it points to the time that Yahweh Sabaoth, or the Lord of Heaven's armies, will himself be Israel's glorious crown. He will be the pride and joy of the remnant of his people. Thus, this statement fixes our understanding of the passage to involve the end times, when this promise will finally be fulfilled. In this passage, we are told that the scoffing rulers in Israel have struck a bargain to cheat death and have made a deal to dodge the grave or Sheol. They say the coming destruction can never touch us, for we have built a strong refuge made of lies and deception. Could this bargain be a reference to their part in the treaty with the many that they, the rulers of Israel, make with the Antichrist in an arrogant attempt to be the provider of their own refuge and security? Yahweh responds to the claim by saying that if they truly do not want to be shaken or experience the coming destruction, they should build on the foundation stone, a firm and tested stone, a precious cornerstone. Whoever believes need never be shaken or disgraced. This is a clear reference to Jesus and is quoted as such by New Testament authors. Then Yahweh makes it clear that this bargain to cheat death, this deal to dodge the grave, will not stand, for he will cancel it, even though he may utilize the agency of the beast via the Antichrist to accomplish this purpose and cancel this 7-year treaty after the first 3.5 years of the tribulation. Isaiah 28, 17 through 19. I will test you with the measuring line of justice and the plumb line of righteousness. Since your refuge is made of lies, a hailstorm will knock it down. Since it is made of deception, a flood will sweep it away. I will cancel the bargain you made to cheat death, and I will overturn your deal to dodge the grave. When the terrible enemy sweeps through, you will be trampled into the ground. Again and again, that flood will come, morning after morning, day and night, until you are carried away. The beauty of the Codex and how it shines light on every aspect of the end times narrative is simply mind-numbing and glorious. Now, the point of this little detour was to explain that with the exception of this treaty with the many, there is no other indication given as to the beginning of the tribulation. And most definitely, we can conclude that it does not begin with the ride of the white horse. Now, let's get back to the white horse and its rider. Let's tie all this together with the white horse and its rider. According to the code and the use of the present tense in connection with this white horse and rider and its conquering activities that are even now occurring, and the fact that it is already gone forth and has been released, it cannot be the Antichrist, and white cannot mean deception. The first seal does not initiate the tribulation, and this rider is in no way connected to the Antichrist. A servant. I love the fact that the rider chooses to be on this horse and to go out to conquer. He is not forced. The rider is imaged as a servant of all that is pure and righteous, and he, on his own volition, chooses to mount this horse and ride with the purpose of victory. A bow. The fact that the rider is now having a bow would have suggested a very scary picture to the original audience. In 53 BC, a Roman general by the name of Crassus went to war against the Parthians without the approval of the Senate, and he suffered one of the most crushing and disgraceful defeats in Roman history. Technically, Rome had a treaty with the Parthians, and Crassus should never have crossed the desert to engage in this fight. But Crassus, it is said, was extremely greedy and was hoping to enlarge the wealth of the Republic and advance his position amongst the powerful leaders in Rome. He came to the battle with an army of 43,000 soldiers, whereas the Parthians came with only 10,000, 9,000 archers on horseback, and 1,000 heavily armed horsemen. In this battle, Rome was completely outmaneuvered and lost 30,000 men, including General Crassus, one of the costliest defeats in Roman history. The Roman army was not prepared to stand against the constant barrage of arrows sent by the Parthian horse archers. Initially, the Romans were in a formation that kept them very tight together as they errantly expected the advance of heavily armed horsemen. But this formation ensured that practically every arrow had a place to land. It is said that the composite bows used by the Parthians were powerful enough to pierce the Roman armor and even penetrate their heavy shields. The Parthians used thousands of camels laden with arrows to resupply their horse archers, so they continued to barrage the Romans with flying artillery till the Romans retreated, leaving thousands dead and wounded. With this picture in mind, the message is this: the rider with a bow is powerful enough to defeat and humiliate even the greatest of foes, no matter how large their army may be. The darkness always thinks they have the numbers and the power, but newsflash, they don't. The aim of this rider on this white horse is always true, right on target. A crown. A Stephanos, or a crown of victory, had been given to this rider. The fact that the rider was given this crown before he began to ride tells us that his mission will, by default, be victorious. There's no way that he cannot succeed. Everywhere he goes, he experiences victory. With that said, he is not always victorious in every single encounter, as conquer is rendered in the subjunctive and not as an indicative. But his overall journey will be one of victory, as he even now goes forth conquering and to conquer. By the way, another little jab towards this fiction that the rider is the Antichrist. The Antichrist will be conquered, and his mission will fail, as he will be permitted to have success for only 42 months, 3.5 years, and then the one who brings destruction will be destroyed. The gospel. Given that this horse and rider are characterized by purity and righteousness, and are sent with the purpose of victory, this horse and rider just might symbolize the spreading of the gospel. The gospel, which is pure and righteous, has always gone forth with this kind of power, and has always accomplished the purposes for which it was sent forth, conquering the darkness and bringing people into Yahweh's righteousness. Yahweh says, "It is the same with my word. I will send it out, and it always produces fruit. It will accomplish all I want to, and it will prosper everywhere I send it." Truly, the word of Yahweh is unconquerable, for it is a sign victory from the get-go. And this rider had been sent out already. The gospel had been sent out. It was not an event of which anyone is waiting. Keep in mind, even when all of Rome was bent on crushing the gospel of Jesus Christ, and had spent massive amounts of resources to hunt down and kill Christians, the gospel flourished. Eventually, Rome had to cede its will to that of Christ. The gospel prevailed. The gospel was victorious. Rome could not conquer it. The gates of hell cannot conquer it. And the gospel will never know anything but conquering. The gospel of Jesus Christ is unconquerable. When it is sent out, it always accomplishes its purposes. Moreover, we are assured that the bondservants of Christ, though slain, will be victorious over the beast. Even when it looks like the beast has the upper hand and Christians are being slaughtered, the bondservants of Jesus Christ are suddenly rescued, some by death and some by rapture. Then we are told in Daniel that the sovereignty, power, and greatness of all the kingdoms under heaven will be given to the holy people of the Most High. Yes, just like Jesus promised, those at the church of Thyatira, those who are even now overcoming, will rule forever as kings and priests, and all rulers will serve and obey them. The gospel is truly unconquerable, for it is sent out to conquer. Once again, since this horse has been sent out and is even now conquering, and this has been true since the gospel was first preached, this horse will continue to have victory until the time of the rapture of the church. The number 1 revisited. As stated previously, we should have expected to discover something about unity in this passage, represented by the number 1. In Revelation 7, we will get a look at all those who have been victorious because of the efforts of this first horse. And of course, they are clothed in white, indicating their purity and righteousness. John explains that he saw a multitude which no one could count, from every nation and all tribes and peoples and tongues standing before the throne and before the Lamb. This is practically the exact same language he used in Revelation 5:9 in reference to the Lamb. For you were slain and purchased for God with your blood from every tribe and tongue and people and nation. In other words, it is the same group of people before the throne and the Lamb. This is an image of all those who have overcome and are even now overcoming. Those who endured to the end and even now and continually chose to be coming out of the great tribulation, the called, chosen, and faithful of God. And they are unified into one kingdom of priests, and they stand in unity before the throne and before the Lamb. Now, in closing, let me be clear. We are not told who this horse and rider are. We are just given images that speak to it, mainly the color white, which speaks of righteousness and purity, and the guarantee of victory, hence the Stephanos. With that said, we are told that this rider had already been released. It has gone forth. Therefore, suggesting that this horse and rider represents the gospel is a conjecture that is consistent with the code and the entire codex. Nevertheless, it is still conjecture. Regardless, it is happening even now and every moment of now since this horse and rider were released, which was before John was given the Revelation narrative. To get a free download of the full written transcript with all the scripture references footnoted, please go to threshermediagroup.com. That is THRESHER mediagroup.com. This is Steve with Thresher Media Group. When you're ready to listen, tune in.